Hare Krishna. I was reflecting the other day on a point that Srila Prabhupada often made, that ultimately there is only one religion, and that religion is service to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Of course, in a more general sense, there are other religions and other religious traditions on the planet, and that brings us to the subject of interfaith and engaging with those other religions. Which is a very good thing, because ultimately all religious traditions are trying to achieve that same thing, service to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. They just may have different emphasis and different ways of doing it, but the kind of core is the same. But of course, for people who have chosen their particular spiritual path like that, as opposed to being born into it, but people who have chosen it, then it's kind of natural they're thinking that their path is the best, if you like, because otherwise they wouldn't have chosen it. And that's the same for devotees. So therefore the interfaith concept can be, in one sense, a little challenging. Of course, one of the core tenets of the Krishna Conscious philosophy is to develop both compassion and also humility. Humility is such a key principle of spiritual life. So that should help us in that engagement with other faiths like that, because we want to be compassionate and also we want to be humble like that. If that's not enough to inspire us in that endeavour, then the words of Srila Bhaktivinode Thakura, the incredible words of Srila Bhaktivinode Thakura, come to mind, where he talked about external Vaishnava dress. That it's important, both important in terms of sending a signal to other people, and so they can identify who we are, but also because the material body is something that we're trying to transcend, that dressing it in spiritual attire, if you like, wearing tilak and all of that, is actually very helpful and a very good thing. But then he says at the same time, if that's what we think is the most important thing, that leads to prejudice, and he warns us very strongly against it, because ultimately it's what's in somebody's heart, it's not the external dress that they may be wearing. And if we develop prejudice thinking that, you know, you have to be wearing certain dress, etc., to be quote-unquote spiritual or a spiritual person, then that's a big mistake. And as he says, it leads to prejudice, and from prejudice it can lead to hatred. Specifically, Bhaktivinode Thakura, at least in the words that he spoke there, he then went on to talk about the Varnashram system, which is of course a very structured system for organising society with the goal of gradually progressing further and further on the spiritual path. But of course, as we know, that system of Varnashram has been greatly corrupted into what's known today in India, the modern day caste system. And basically the problem is that the caste system is based on birth, which of course is based on the body, whereas the Varnashram system is based on guna and karma, your qualities and your activities, which obviously is the proper understanding like that. But Bhaktivinode Thakura is just explaining, though, that we still, even with the Varnashram system, cannot become fixated on the externals and on the ritualistic aspects like that. And if we do, that leads to prejudice against genuine spiritual practitioners, and ultimately it can lead to hatred, etc. So yeah, I was just reflecting on that the other day, and I was thinking of those words of Srila Bhaktivinode Thakura, that we should, our starting point should always to be looking at and considering all living entities as the eternal servants of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and not immediately categorizing them in this way or that way that may lead to prejudice and create blockages and obstacles and hindrances on the path of their spiritual life in one sense, but more particularly our spiritual life. And I think if we have that kind of understanding and that reflecting on those words of Srila Bhaktivinode Thakura, then our interfaith, if we're engaged in interfaith activities, but even in our general lives, it will make things much, much easier for other people, but also for ourselves. Hare Krishna.